Hello, crypto world. Welcome to the Chart Historian. My name is Justin, and on this channel, I delve deep into crypto charts, exploring chart structures, fractals, and patterns. So the Casper community has been hit with some challenging times as of late. The Casper Labs debacle has affected the Casper chart. It originally was holding up fine. As of now, it has declined a fair amount. So if you're to go on X, you would undoubtedly come across all kinds of different opinions on what Casper is doing, its future. Some people are quite pessimistic, others are quite hopeful. In this video, I'm going to stick to my knitting. I'm going to focus on what I know, and that is the macro repetitive structure that I believe Casper has. Now, I'm going to start off with the statement that this is not the end of history. Casper, from all we can see on this chart, is doing actually what it should be doing. Let me explain. Let's bring this chart to life with some boxes. So this is a portion of the repetitive structure that Casper has. So for those of you who are new, you're probably wondering, what's a repetitive structure? Yes, it is my belief that Casper has a repetitive macro structure. Now, to fully see the whole structure, we need to go back to the very beginning of the chart. Okay, so I'm no longer on TradingView. This is charts.cointrader.pro. The reason why I'm using this is I can go back to the very beginning of the Casper chart on a small time frame. So this is on an hour candle. It's very important to be able to go back to the very beginning of the chart on a small time frame because this repetitive macro structure takes place on a small time frame and it repeats several times. I just want to get you familiar with this structure. I'm not going to go into a deep dive. So Casper has a bull run structure. It starts with a bull run structure. That's what this is. It's also what this is, and it's also what this giant one over here is. Now, it repeats on different scales, as we can see, which brings up an important point. Whenever a structure or a fractal repeats, the timing, height, and depth, those will always be original, even though the structure repeats. So the same structure will repeat again. It could repeat on a larger scale or a smaller scale, or parts of the structure can play out on a larger scale or a smaller scale. And all that is possible from the timing, height, and depth being original, even though the structure is repeating. So after it comes to a peak, it pulls back, and then it does this next fractal. This next fractal is kind of a topping structure where it has some waves. It doesn't always take place way up here. In fact, over here, it takes place way down here after this crash. So it pulls back from the peak, and then it does this. After this, it breaks down and creates a low, a bottom to this overall decline. There is a bounce. We can see it here that indicates the bottom of this structure. After it completes this decline, Casper goes into a new phase. It's a sideways range-bound time. In here, there's 3 different fractals, and the basic gist of it is it moves back up into this zone, into the sideways range-bound time zone. It pulls back, and this one goes back up again, so it does kind of a wave, and then it comes to a point, goes into the next structure where it moves back up, drops, goes sideways, moves back up again, creates this bowl-type structure that we can see here, and then it just kind of goes flat and then drops. Sometimes it just drops, like over here, it just drops instead of going flat and then dropping. After that is a bounce. This bounce ends this sideways range-bound time. This little green box is where the bull run structure begins. So we can see that it repeats once again over here. We have the bull run. It pulls back and does that little topping structure. This time it takes place lower than it did over here. It then goes into the declining part. Look how big that bounce was this time around. So the timing, height, and depth played out uniquely. It repeated the same thing, a decline with a bounce, just like it did over here, but this time it played out much larger. After this, it goes into this next fractal, which is part of the sideways range-bound time, the beginning part. This one, it moves up and then it slowly declines. This one moved up and declined really in just one candle, and then it moves back up again, drops just like it does over here, and then it goes flat just like it does over here. We next go into this structure, which repeats again on a larger scale. So price moves up, drops, goes flat, moves back up again, creates a bowl structure, and then it, like I said, it winded down to a point versus going flat and then dropping. So once this structure completes, it goes into the bounce. This bounce is the ending part of the sideways range-bound time. After that, it goes into the bull run structure. So this bull run declines. There's that topping structure, which we see here and here. After this, it drops, and I'm going to go over to TradingView because this one is playing out on a very large scale over here. So here is that declining structure. It ends with a bounce. It's a very small bounce. We can zoom in. So here's that bounce. It moves up into the first range-bound fractal, pulls back, moves back up again, and then declines, goes flat, goes into the second range-bound fractal, which has that bowl structure. So price moves up, drops, goes flat, comes back up again to another peak, creating this bowl type structure right here, and winds its way down to a point. And then it finally goes into the bounce. Now, notice how this bounce looks different from this bounce. And this bounce looks different from this bounce. But they all do the same thing. They move up, and then they decline. They move up, and then they decline. They move up, and then they decline. We don't know how much it's going to decline, how long it's going to play out. And this brings us to a very important point about the Casper chart. And it kind of is key to understanding what the Casper chart does and doesn't do. So it's very difficult to put the Casper chart in a neat little box where all these moves up and moves down are relative in proportion to each other, because you get these crazy things like this. Look how large this bull run was. Look how large this decline took place before this fractal took place. Here it was small. It declined just a little bit, and then this structure takes place. Here it was larger. This bounce took place on a very small time frame, didn't drop below the low of the sideways range-bound time, but this next time around it takes place, it drops lower than the low of the sideways range-bound time. So trying to put Casper in a neat little box where everything is proportional, and if it drops below a certain point, then it's a bad thing, that doesn't really work very well with the Casper chart. Just as we can see between these two bounces, this one held its ground above the low of this sideways range-bound time, yet this one didn't. And when it crashed, here's the low right here. It drops pretty drastically to the low. It then moves sideways a bit, and then it drops again in kind of a capitulation thing, and then it does this bouncing thing. Well, we see something similar on today's chart where it goes below this low of the sideways range-bound time, and it kind of goes sideways, even tries to make it back up, and then it can't, so it just crashes again. And I think we're just kind of working our way through something similar to what this was. It was just a time of straight-up nastiness. It bounced around. It was lower than this entire range-bound time. I'm sure this was a time where there was a bit of despair in the Casper community, as small as it was probably at this time, seeing these lows. But this is where the chart begins to change. At some point, it pulled itself out of this and began to work on the first bull run structure. That's what this green box is here. That's what this green box is here. Now, I don't know how this bounce is going to take place, but as of now, there is no evidence on this chart that says that this repetitive macro structure has broken. We're in a point where it's declining. That's what this chart is supposed to do at this point. That's what the structure tells us it does. Now, it doesn't say it's only going to go so low and then stop. What really has disshuffled people is probably the continuation of this decline. And yeah, I understand that. That is not cool to go through. I thought it was kind of pulling itself out of this decline over here. But with this drop, it's telling us, nope, it's not it. Now, we have to create a bottom here, and it may take some time. Let's zoom in. So here we are on an hour candle. We are going to have to create a bottoming structure once again. This does look like it could potentially be a capitulation, but we need to be open to further declines as well. I'm hoping that this is the bottoming structure beginning. That's what I hoped with over here. And for a while, it was looking pretty promising. But then, bam, this happened. So many times with charts, with declines, you get bad news at the bottom. And maybe that's what's taking place now. Time will tell. But part of me thinks that's what could potentially maybe be in the works. We'll have to see. Either way, what we want to look for is a bottoming out structure similar to what this was doing. Maybe it won't take as long. If it can hold its ground, it will begin to move up. Now, this move up, like I pointed out in my last video, is going to be a slow move up, possibly in the beginning, something similar to this. I mean, it may look drastic at certain points, but look how it starts. It just starts with a series of smaller kind of higher highs, but it's a fight. It's a fight going through this part. Now, maybe it'll play out different, but I would be prepared for something similar to this. But eventually it starts picking up steam, and as it goes along, it really comes to life. So my message to you is that, structurally speaking, Casper is doing what it should be doing. There's no evidence of this macro structure being broken. What would be the evidence of this macro structure being broken? Well, if it no longer followed this basic thing, so maybe it would go flat and we don't get a bull run. But as of now, 100% of the time, it has done what it should do. It plays out different. It plays out uniquely every single time. So there is no evidence so far of devastation. We're just going through the nasty point of what this structure tells us it does. Here we are in today's chart. So what we want to look for is a bottoming out structure. It could also just begin to move straight up. It doesn't necessarily have to do a large bottoming structure. That bottoming structure could be at play right now, and then we start seeing it move up. I don't know how it will play out. What I do know is that this bounce ends with a decline, and after that, it goes into the bull run structure. So there you have it, folks. That's how I see Casper at the moment. This is a painful moment in that macro structure, but it is my belief that this structure is intact and good days will come. This is not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor, but if you did find this video helpful, it'd be much appreciated if you hit that thumbs up button. And if you're not yet a subscriber, I recommend hitting that subscribe button. I'll continue to follow up on this chart as it continues to develop. You can also check out my Patreon and Discord. The link will be in the description of this video. I'm so glad you caught this video. I hope you catch my next one. Have a great day, and bye for now.